The Truth Podcast, live from Harmonics Media Center. You got the General here. You got Big John. You got Carson, a.k.a. Little Winston. We got Nikki G in the background. And today we have a special guest, good friend of mine, actually one of my mentees. I consider him like a little brother to me. We got Andrew Jaramillo, amazing guy. Andrew, how you doing, brother?
Not bad, man. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Kind of hard to talk about myself, but just grew up in the South Valley of Albuquerque, born and raised, and went to school in those in that area. Went to Ernie Powell and Rio Grande, and just grew up little humble beginnings. Great parents. Not a lot of people get to in that area, especially get to grow up with a dad. Well, I was blessed to have two dads I grew up with. I grew up with my pops, who's like my best friend, Steve Jaramillo, and then also my father, my stepfather. I mean, that man is no different than my dad. Both these men have always been in my life, been a big positive role model, and taught me how to be a hard worker, and kind of, just showed me the way. But other than that, I mean, just from Albuquerque, born and raised, public servant. I'm in law enforcement, but like I said, didn't really know where I was going when I was younger, and I'm just super blessed to even be over here talking with you in the
Andrew,
podcast.
One of the things we talk about, the reason you came to our mind, me and Carson were talking about this specifically, is that you have the young millionaires mindset, and what I've always trying to explain to individuals, it's not about you're running your own business, you're owning something, you're doing something large. It's about where you start. I was in my industry for 7 years before I jumped out to do anything else, right? And I mastered that, but it doesn't matter what I do. You can put me to cut weeds, you can put me to polish shit. I'm still going to do it at that high level. And I think one of the things that came up in our mind was, who do we know that's just been a success story? And in my mind, you've been a success story, and you almost bring to the essence of like growing up in a small town, because really the South Valley is like its own world when it comes to Albuquerque in general. And like what you say, and there's just, it's kind of growing up the way I did. And I think one of the things that really, really set me was, and I want to kind of talk about this. Did you have a lot of would you say negative influences or stuff growing up, and how did you overcome that? How was that experience for you? Let's go back down to when you were in elementary, how was it? Can you walk us through that?
Well, you hit it on the nail. The South Valley is a different, way of living. I mean, someone that if they're from the South Valley just by the way they talk, the way they look at you, and it's this cultural, macho man type mentality that you grow up in, all the way from elementary school. I remember in elementary school, friends, in third grade bringing guns to school. I can recall, a friend at recess walking up to us and showing us in his backpack, he got a gun from his uncle and bragging about it,
Yeah.
And, I learned how to fight. That was one of the biggest things I learned in the South Valley, is learn how to fight. I mean, you have this, culture that everyone's against you. And when you have that mindset that everyone's against you, and it's almost like a victim mentality or attitude, and you're always on the defense. And that kind of mindset is something that, everyone needs to break, because that's what holds people back.
Right.
And luckily, even though I kind of started off with that type of mindset and attitude, because that's what I grew up around. My friends, my cousins, all of them were, you name a gang in Albuquerque and I have a cousin from that gang,
Right,
what I mean?
Right.
Even my family were fighting each other, because, that's just the way it is in the South Valley, and, that, gang mindset, the party mindset, I'm going to live, I'm going to die young mindset was what I grew up with. And, and unfortunately, as I was growing up, I did lose a lot of friends, whether to death or, to drugs or, they're in jail. I mean, when I was in the police academy, one of my best friends, a guy that I grew up with since playing Yaffle football, good dude, Moose. I mean, he passed away and he was murdered, I mean, just these type of things that we grew up around, and, the blessings and the different people that I met, that really kind of stirred me away from that mindset.
What was the key factor for you that when you were looking through and saying, you know what, this isn't a good sauce? Was it because you had good mentors, or what was that? What was that kind of? Were you able to see, growing up north, right? Having my mom and the structure that she had, and seeing my uncles, and then I could look across the road, and then there was those influences, and I'd have to make a conscious decision to say which road am I going to walk. But I had great examples in my life, like my mom, my dad, my uncles were done well, and I'm like, well, you go work at the laboratories and you got good shit, or you can end up in this and you go to shit. Like my brother, right? He took the wrong route, went to jail, went to prison, did all that crazy stuff. But what was it for you that really you said, no, I don't want this?
Well, one of the best things I think that happened to me is, the fact that I was born after a lot of my cousins, and seeing their struggles and the mistakes that they're making and in and out of jail type situations. It really opened my eyes that, hey, I don't want this life. But more importantly than that, it was my faith in God. I can say for sure that my parents, that was one of the biggest things that they put in front of me was God's word from a young kid. I mean, the stuff that I learned in the Bible from a young age, it stood by me. So whenever I was making those bad decisions, I didn't go to that decision where it was life changing or altering, because something will pop up and I remember a teaching, or I remember something, or like the conscience and the spirit that I have inside of me would stop me from doing it.
Can you share one that was there an example as like a kid that really popped up, like maybe a verse, or what was it?
A good example, and part of it was, I truly believe there's angels all around us, and there were several angels in my life. And Bernadette Cordova was my principal. Matter of fact, John knows her. He's worked with her, but she was my vice principal. I had people like them surrounding me. Well, there was this other teacher. We call her Miss Cal, and she's 4'0", right? And I was in high school. I thought I was Mr. Cool Guy, and I had just gotten in a fight with some dude, and I got sent to ISS, and she was the ISS teacher, right? And I was messing up in class, and I got in a fight, and they sent me to this in school suspension, and then I started talking to this. I became friends with Miss Cal, and she had a Bible on her desk, and I remember. I always remember different verses and different things. And I was talking to her about it. And I was talking to her about the 7 church epistles. And I was talking about like how, the Bible is broken up to, as far as doctrine of proof and correction. And I knew all this knowledge about the Bible. Right. And I just remember her looking at me, and she's like, I'm pretty impressed on what you have to say. And then she opened up the Bible and she went to a verse, and she's like, hey, read this verse. And the basis of the verse is, you talk the talk, but why don't you walk the walk? And I just remember that like nailing me in my heart, right? Like I'm over here in trouble talking about God's word to a teacher that just set me straight, man. Yeah. And that's the way that she was. Well, I had those type of examples, like Miss Cordova when I was in middle school. I got in a fight with some actually my friend, and then we both ended up in her class. I mean, in her office, and then having conversations with her, and she saw something different in me that she, like. She always remembered my smile, right? And that every time I'd run into her, she'd always mention that. And them taking the time to really like steer me in the right direction instead of just not letting me fall in the cracks. That was everything.
Something that comes in my mind. What you're saying is, in a verse that's in my mind, is wise is the man who learns from someone else's mistakes.
Absolutely,
right? And I think one of the things when you can really look at life and ask yourself, if I see this guy go down this road and I see the end result, why would I want to follow? It's called the lemming effect, right? One lemming runs, 1,000 go out, they all go over the cliff, they all die. But so many times you see people follow bad people, and it's because of that. But one thing that I share with you, Andrew, is people ask me why you've been so successful. And I tell people when I was 12 years old, I've shared this story multiple times. When I climbed the mountain, got on my knees, prayed to God to give me the strength of Samson. Ever since I've had just crazy amount of physical strength, right? Then I got the gifts and stuff. And I was just telling Nikki this morning, it's crazy. We went to breakfast early, and I said, you know what? People talk about reading all kinds of books, right? Tony Robbins, even listening to the General's Truth podcast and all that shit. But if we just read the Bible from start to finish, That's all the handbook we need.
See all the examples through that.
Yeah, it's right there, right? But we choose to do other things. And I think one of the things that I really love about that is that those teachers had that. And I'm still, and this is the gospel according to me, and I don't probably piss off some people, but for me, this is where I believe that those great stuff should have been still in the school systems. It should have never been pulled out, because there's a difference between a fear of your dad or a fear of an authority, but there's a difference when you're afraid of your creator, right? It's a different level. And it's not about it's a respect. It's not a fear, it's a respect. And that's what I think is awesome. So Andrew, so you had that, so you're kind of like enlightened in your heart. And then as you went to high school, what was in your mind?
Well, being the coolest, baddest guy there, right? It was about girls and just being the tough guy. And I was always in sports growing up, and football was my sport. But in high school, it's a little bit different, right? Because if you didn't get grades, you didn't play. And so every single year in high school, I would always play the first part of the season, and then I get my first report card, and boom, I'm kicked out, right? And so then what do? Well, I hang out with the bad examples, and I shouldn't say bad examples, because I still call these guys my friends to this day, right? Because they're like family, and different people that I hung out with in high school, and whether we took different paths or whatever, for the most part, the guys that I hung out with, we were never part of a gang, but we had our own little like crew, right? We were just like, none of us ever claimed any, anything or any sets or anything like that, but we were just like, we had each other's back,
like a brotherhood.
Yeah, and we would, we all grew up in the same neighborhood, and in high school, like our biggest thing was, getting hooked up with girls and party, right? Every weekend we had a party at one of our friends' house that their parents were never there, and we had a blast, right? But the thing about that was, a couple of my friends, while we were doing that, we didn't grow up with money, right? We had some friends that had money, but and the parents were good and everything else, but for the most part, the guys that I hung out with, we didn't come from money, but everyone likes money, right?
Right.
And there was a couple of opportunities where I saw my buddies start selling drugs, and good people, but they start selling drugs and getting caught, and and it was literally life altering for them. And if I did the same thing that they did, and I'll tell you a story about that, because I was tempted, right?
Right.
I bought this salvaged 5.0. It was my car. I loved it to death, but it was a salvaged piece of crap, but I saw potential in it. So, I always believe that successful people are good stewards of what they do have, right?
Yes.
They don't focus on what the future things that they're going to have.
No.
They focus on what they have, and they're good stewards to it.
Yeah.
Well, I made that thing the best thing that I could possibly make it. I work on that thing every weekend. I worked at Mancy's restaurant on the weekends and at Albertsons, and I made this vehicle my best vehicle. But even then, my buddies were driving around, Lincolns and Cadillacs, and had all the bells and whistles, and I'm working my butt off, and I just have this, it was a Mustang. I thought it was still pretty badass, but it wasn't really what they had, right? And what is it that usually attracts girls? It's that power, that money, that you have stability.
That's what they call it now. They call it the clout, baby.
So I tell you, man, I got really tempted, right? And I was frustrated, I was pissed off, and I went and I thank God that I did this, but I went and I talked to my dad about it. And I was like, Dad, I'm just so frustrated and pissed off, and I'm working my ass off, and here my buddies, they're not doing it the way that I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it the right way. And yet they have everything, they're rolling around with, nice rides and guns and drugs. And you name it, they had it. Right.
Yeah.
And I always remember this. My dad told me, he's like, all right, if you're considering selling drugs, is that what you're coming to talk to me about? He was able to discern it. He's like, you want to sell drugs? All right. You know what? I'm going to quit my job. We're going to go and we're going to do it big together. We're going to sell drugs together. And you can see the hurt in his eyes. I always remember his eyes, and you can see him, it pissed him off, but the way that he handled it, he really opened my eyes. Like, well, we'll do it together, and we'll be in prison together. We'll get killed together. Whatever you want to do, let's do it. I taught you to work hard, and everything that everything that I have, I worked for. And this is, if it's not enough, then let's do it then I'm doing it wrong. And man, talk about bringing you to your knees and opening. I mean, it was never an option after that.
Which dad was this?
It was my
Your
my
biological dad?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's freaking awesome. So this is what we talk about, and this is what I've been trying to talk about on the Poot. There's no get rich quick bullshit.
You can't.
And anything I've told you. I mean, I've told you that. You knew this before that, but everything takes time, and you have to go one brick at a time. But because I saw this quote, and I can't find it. I should have sent as it shows quick success and then long term. And you look at the long term success, and that's like Apple or that's Amazon. And when they started, like myself, I started from the single white trailer to this facility. You look at those different things, just one brick at a time. But we can get caught up in saying, you know what, we can do it this way and cut this corner and then compromise our lives forever. Right? We're just completely screwed at this point. So you do that. You had that conversation. Then what was the next step, Andrew? What was at that point? You said, "What I need to."
Well, my next step was, I still wanted something, right? I still wanted to have the nice car. I still wanted, more than what I had, right? So the next step was, well, if I want it, I better work for it, right?
Right.
So that was at the same time I started picking up more shifts at Albertsons. I was working at Albertsons as a cart pusher. I started working more with my my aunt at Los Compadres and at Max La Sierra. I mean, I grew up around these restaurants and they always had work,
Right.
And so I would work with them, and the money that I made working over there, I would put into my vehicle, and so it turned out to be a really nice vehicle at the end. My senior year, I was driving one of the nicer vehicles at Rio Grande, but it was by hard work. I mean, I put the money into the engine, and I worked on the engine. I was not. I mean, if school grades came from just the fact of attendance and focusing on one class, I would have been a straight A student, because I was always in auto mechanics working on my car. Putting side exhaust and making custom things, learning how to weld and rebuilding, the carburetor, just the stuff that I learned, because it forced me to. It helped me out now that I'm an adult, right? Because now I'm building a house, and I'm literally building everything in this house, because I work with APD, as a law enforcement officer and all that stuff, and it brings and provides for my family. But I got to make sure that I can still provide for my family, and then yet do the finer things that I want to do, including building this house. And we have a house, and it's and we live comfortable in it, but we wanted something more. And so, when you get people bringing in quotes like $40,000-$50,000 per job, whether it's HVAC or electrical, well, the same thing that happened when I was younger, it forced me to learn how to do these things so I can do it myself.
What's cool as shit is Carson's building his own house. He's doing that. My cousin, you remind me a lot of my cousin Fabian. We both worked on our cars. We went down there this weekend to visit my dad, and my dad's literally same thing, right? My whole family has built everything. They worked and then they put into it because they couldn't afford the things, right? I've got soft sauce, I'm always minding the contractors. But I didn't forget that. But I looked at my cousin, and he just built this carport, and this carport is just holy shit, right? Next level. He's working in his keyboard that his dad gave him. We lost my uncle Leroy years ago, but he's put every single into it, and that just says something, right? It gives you a different level of pride
in that,
in anything, right? And I had a Mustang like you. It's crazy. We both put our work into it. I'm working fast food, but that really gave me the level of confidence and the level of work ethic and what it shows when you do something. And I think that's what's lacking now. People don't just take something small like the car or whatever it is to make it better, to know what it is to start and end something. I mean, that's what's kind of missing at a really huge level, right?
Yeah. Well, and I truly believe the fact, and these little things that like kind of building blocks of becoming the man that I am, teachers and it really takes a community to raise someone, especially in a place like the South Valley, right? Because both my parents, they got divorced when I was really young. I was like 5 or 6 years old when they got divorced, and when they divorced, I'm just so grateful that they were still friends.
Yes.
But when they divorced, what happens when families divorce? Well, they have to work more, right? Because now they have 2 bills and 2 this and 2 that, 2 different lives. My mom was, with my stepdad. My dad was, he literally would go into work at 5 a.m. and get out, at 10 at night, just working overtime every day. I mean, there's no one that works harder than my dad. And then, and then my stepdad, I mean, that guy, he's an attorney, yet that guy doesn't pay anyone to do anything for him. So he builds every single thing that he has. He's building a new balcony at his house right now, and you think he'd go and hire people? No, he does everything on himself. And watching these people and the build, like them working hard for what they have, it was the best example I can ever have. I mean, my mom, when I was in 7th grade, Manny Pile, I wanted some Jordans, right? All my friends had some nice, Jordans were the thing back then, and they still are now. But that was like the big thing, right? And back then, Jordans were like $100, right? And I went up to her, I was like, Mom, I'm tired of getting these, junk shoes. I want something nice. I want to show off, and the girls like the Jordans. And I always remember that she really pushed and kind of like, woke me up too. She's like, I mean, first off, she's like, I can't afford no damn. I can barely. I'm paying, making sure you have what you need as far as the lights, the bills. I mean, all that stuff. That's my contribution. If you want something extra, you go work. And I'm like, well, how the heck am I supposed to work? I'm in 7th grade. Well, I figured it out, right? I mean, she forced me to learn for myself the value of money.
What'd you do? What was your first job?
My first job, I went to my auntie Janice, and she owned Los Compadres, and I went over there. We were eating one day, and I was like, hey, Aunt, can you do me a favor? I really want. I want. My mom forced me to get a job to buy some clothes, and my mom was a waitress there at the same time. And I was like, I really want more. I was like, can I work on the weekends? And she's like, yeah, you can be a busboy. And so in 7th grade, that was my first job. I was working as a busboy. And I remember the first day I got my check, right? It was the first weekend. I made she paid me like $4 an hour. And then plus I got tips from the waitresses, right? So I would really work hard to make sure they gave me some tips, right? Yeah. And so I remember I think I finally got enough after the second weekend to go and buy some Jordans. And so I got the money, and we went to the mall. I had my mom take me to the mall, and I'm there and I'm standing there, and I couldn't buy the Jordans. I just couldn't do it. After working so hard, to me, it was really hard work at the time, right? So working so hard, I didn't buy the Jordans. I kept the money and I saved it, and I didn't buy the Jordans, man. But it taught me a lesson. I mean, it wasn't about the Jordans. It wasn't even about the job. It was about the fact that there's value in the things that you do, and the things that cost money. I mean, it doesn't come to people. Like what you have, you earned it, and it didn't come to you. You had to be a good steward starting from, when you're younger, and build on it and build on it and build on it. That it doesn't happen overnight. And, finding that out for myself and seeing, well, you buy this stuff and you buy a car, Mom, so why can't you buy me shoes? Well, yeah, she works her butt off just to buy those things and to barely maintain. And just like watching that, and I always, and I'll go back to another story, but my stepdad, Rafael Padilla, I was really, we used to have like once a year, he had this big field in the back of one of his properties, and it was like a jungle, all the Chinese elms and weeds and everything will be growing. And we went back there and we worked our butts off, man. We were chopping trees. I even hit my leg with a chainsaw, cut my leg open, man. And we would do that all the time, right? So it was normal. I just kept on going. And afterwards, I wasn't expecting nothing from him because that's what we did. And afterwards, he pulled me aside and he pulls out a $50 bill and he hands it to me. And he's like, I want to teach you something about giving and receiving. And giving is receiving. And he's like, so for me, this is $50, right? But I'm giving it to you. You earned it and you worked hard, but that's not the point. He says, I want to give you and it was me and my cousin, Rafael Padilla, and he was the same name as my stepdad, but
Junior.
No, it's no relation to him.
Okay.
But it was my cousin's same name.
Yeah.
They're all Padillas in that area. But he gives us both the $50 bill, right? And he says, so I'm handing you this money, and now you see my wallet, it's less money in my wallet because I handed it to you. He's like, but let me share something with you. When you give, you receive. He's like, it's a biblical principle. And though it might look like I don't have less in my wallet because I'm giving you, because it's the right thing to do, even though I know that you guys will come and do it no matter what. You didn't come expecting to be paid. He's like, but because I'm giving it to you, not only are you being blessed, but I'm being blessed. Because if we keep our eyes and our focus on the kingdom of heaven and put our treasures up there, and then he showed us the verse in Matthew, and he went down and showed us that nothing on this earth, no moth, nothing can destroy the treasures in heaven. This right here, I can lose it. I can lose my wallet and lose the money right now.
Right.
He's like, but when I give to you, I'm giving and I'm adding to the treasures in heaven. And so that's another, principle that I live by, and that's why I'm willing to help out anyone and everyone. Whoever God puts in front of me, man, I'll help them out. I mean, God put Brian in front of me. I don't even care for politics, right? But God put Brian in front of me. So, hey, I know how to do certain things in politics. I'll help them out. Whoever God puts in front of me, that's number one,
I'm still waiting, but just so you guys know, I'm still waiting for my turkey. You know what I mean? He said he was gonna cook me his turkey. I made a hole, he never showed up. But
this year, bro, this year.
One thing I want to highlight about Andrew and just listening to your stories that I noticed is that you kind of don't make any excuse, which is kind of a big thing that we see nowadays. And people are like, oh, I don't have time for this, or I don't have enough money to do this, or X, Y, and Z, right? And, a lot of reasons why me and Jack both said bring you on too is because one, you have a great career in law enforcement. Two, you're a family man, right? You got 2 awesome kids, a wife. And 3, you're building your own house. But one thing that you said is that, you strive for more, even going back to when you wanted the Jordans or anything like that. And now your house, right? But you almost find a way to make it happen. And you're not so much like, oh, this isn't realistic for me, or I can't achieve this. You pretty much look at anything that you want in life and you say, you know what, I'm going to find a way to do it. And you work hard for it and achieve it. And that's what makes it so awesome to see from my perspective, so to say, because you don't have that, oh, I don't have enough money to do this, or I don't know how to do this. You seem like the type of person, if you don't know how, you're just going to figure out how to do it for yourself and do it the right way you want to, you know what I mean? So that's one thing I want to highlight that is pretty awesome with Andrew, because I mean, you got a full-time job, kids, and you're still making time to do this house project. I mean, we've talked about it for a while now, and sometimes I'll see your posts on social media and I'm like, dang, this guy's actually getting it done,
He's digging, baby. He's digging.
No,
I see him digging.
That's always one thing that we hear, right? It's like, oh, well, I have the kids, or people are just so quick to make an excuse to back out of something. And like I say, I admire you because you don't have that. And not one time have I heard you say that at all, that you didn't have that at all.
I appreciate that. And, like I said, I never wanted to be a victim, right? Because that's part of being a victim, right? Oh, I can't do it. I can't, that can't attitude. And one of the things I was always taught when I was younger is the person who says they can and the person that says that they can't, they're both right. And if you say that you can, you manifest that, you can make it happen. And
of course,
growing up, like I was always like, and my sister, man, she was always amazing in school, right? She was straight A student, complete opposite of me, homecoming queen, valedictorian, you name it. She did everything right when it came to school and education and sports and amazing things, right? And I always had the attitude because of the culture and the people I was hanging around with. Well, she's a goody two shoes, and I would look at her this way, right? And that type of mindset and attitude, it didn't really change. I mean, I still had that same attitude, like, oh, I'm not going to go to Starbucks or all these different things, because when you're from the South Valley, you have this like, I don't know.
You have like a certain law is what it is that you can and can't do, or it's like frowned upon.
Yeah, you're whitewashed or whatever, whatever they call it, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like I met Robin, who, she's like my balance, right? My wife Robin, she's my balance, because when I met her, we actually knew each other since T-ball, right? We played the same T-ball team together. Her dad was my coach. Her dad was a retired law enforcement officer. He's like a third dad to me. I mean, I was saying earlier that most people in the South Valley don't really grow up with that dad figure. Well, shoot, man, I've had 3 different dad figures in my life, but my father-in-law, he was my great dare teacher when I was in elementary school. He was one that taught me about drug resistance and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'm from the South Valley too, and I did it. And I'm a police officer, and I kind of always put that in the back of my mind that, hey, that might be a fun job,
Yeah.
But when I met Robin, it kind of opened my world to other things that I never thought I would ever want or accomplish. I mean, I would, if it wasn't for Robin, I'd probably be okay with joining the police department, staying a patrol level officer the rest of my career, and then, that being it, that being enough, right? Well, she kind of showed me other things. She showed me that, you can succeed, you can be a leader, you can want more and be more, and you don't have to feel guilty about it, because it was almost a guilt, right? Well, if I'm doing better than the people that are around me, then I'm I'm trying
Like,
to
who
one
do you
up
think
them,
you
or,
are?
yeah.
You're too good for them nowadays, and things
Yeah,
like that.
and that wasn't the right attitude. But Robin gave me that balance of like, hey, before Robin, I never even traveled, right? With her, every year we go somewhere, fancy, or we go to Disneyland, or she showed me a whole nother world, and I actually got to grow up with that too. 'Cause we were young, when I ran back into her, I was 21 years old. I just finished the academy, and we came together, and it was opening to a whole new world. I mean, from me being, this, I remember us being at restaurants, and I still had that macho man, whatever attitude, that South Valley attitude, right? Where we're sitting down at a restaurant and someone's looking at me and I'm just mean mugging them, right? And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean what I'm doing?" I didn't even know I was doing it, right? It was just natural.
Yeah.
And this guy kept on looking at me, and we're eating, and I'm still, and I finally look over, and I was like, "What are you looking at?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "What are you looking at?" We start, arguing in the middle of a damn, restaurant, right?
Was this in the South Valley?
No, it was at Max La Ciudad, I remember.
Oh, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's why.
But so he ended up not doing nothing or saying nothing, and here I am, a young rookie police officer. I still had that mentality, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean what I'm doing? I'm not doing nothing. It's just normal." And she's like, No, that's not normal." And I was like, "Well, yeah, it is." And he was looking at me. And she's like, "Maybe you wanted to say hi. Maybe he recognized you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." But like it took like her to open my eyes and say, "Hey, that's not normal," or, "Hey, you can be a leader. You can move up in the ranks, or you can, never, I would have been, if it was up to me in the way that I grew up, I'd have been okay living the way I live, and never ever trying to achieve anything more, right?" Where with her, I mean, I graduated. I'm the first.
She pretty much pushed you.
Yeah, I'm the first person in my family, my blood family, to have a college degree. And yet my sister, who was like the brainiac, valedictorian, and she just actually got her degree too, which is awesome. And she's older than me. I'm the baby in the family, but I was the first one to get my degree, and it was because of her pushing me. I mean, I remember I was like, I never thought I was smart. I never thought I can do educational stuff and stuff like that, right? But the academy showed me how to study, and that was huge, right? Because I never thought I could do it. It forced me. I can deal with the yelling. I can deal with, but when I literally was day in, day out working on homework. The first day of the academy, I ended up filling a test that you're supposed to like prepare for before you get there, and I got like 78 of the 100 wrong, right? And so that night I had to do, we had the homework, and if you failed something, you'd have to do write the question and answer 10 times each, right? And I stayed up until, because the academy, you get off around 5:36, and you go home, you get all your stuff prepared for the next day, and then you have to do all your homework. I didn't go to bed that night. I literally, if any night that I was going to quit, it would have been that night, because I didn't go to bed. I had to get it done. I knew I had to do it. So I stood there, and it took me the whole night. But then when we had the next test on it, I passed with 100, no problem at all. I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's all I have to do to study? Like, it taught me how to study.
Repetitive ways of writing it down.
Yeah, so it taught me how to study. And so I remember talking to her, and I was like, "Hey, Robin, what if I went to law school? What if I went to college? Maybe I should do that." And she's like, "What? Are you serious?" Boom. She literally drove me to the same college that her dad went to, Wayland Baptist University, signed me up that day. And, the next semester I started, and well, I'm in it now, so I better succeed. I better get through it. It would have never happened if it wasn't for that motivation and that other vision that she had that I didn't have. So, I mean, I truly believe a lot of success also comes from the people you surround yourself with.
Absolutely.
Especially the person that you choose to spend your life with.
Absolutely. This is crazy. So Robin, so you guys don't know, but Robin sings the song on the Young Millionaire song, phenomenal voice, good friend of mine also. Robin grew up in the South Valley also, right?
Yeah, but she grew up in the South Valley, but she didn't.
Little more on the ritzy side.
But she did not grow up in the South Valley. She grew up in the South Valley, lived in the South Valley, didn't attend any of the schools in the South Valley though. Her sports, everything that she did was outside of it. And rightfully so. Her parents, they really, her dad was a police officer too, and he really did everything in his power to set his kids up for success. You know, her brothers are state championship sports guys. She's a state championship softball player, singer. I mean, all these different things he put. I mean, no one can deny the effort that he put in his kids.
That's awesome.
And the stuff that he taught them, right?
Andrew, it's crazy is because that's kind of a lot like how my mom was, right? You got to be my mom, and that's like I got advantages. Even I grew up in northern New Mexico, but I kind of didn't. Nikki always says that I wasn't born, that I was bred, and that was exactly it. Like I literally was really subdued from a lot of things. I traveled a shitload. That's why, you know, life hasn't really changed for me. It's just, you know, it's a bigger magnifier. But that's crazy. The reason I asked that question is you see that when you get to see things that the normal individual doesn't, it's already preparing you. This is why I tell people when you're in an Ivy League school or you grow up in the Hamptons or you're in New York or these big cities and you're among this success, why you're set up to actually win more than the average guy, because you're exposed to it so much, right? You're always exposed to it. And this kind of leads into this. So Andrew, let me ask you this question. I mean, we met up. What was your take on the gen? I mean, from your perspective as a regular man and being in law, what was your read on me when you first met me?
Well, it's cool. The way I met you is because of Mikey Brooks, right?
Right.
You know, Mikey Brooks is a mutual friend of ours, and you know, I met him at a political event with Brian Colon, and me and him became friends. You know, and one day there was an event at, I think it was at the convention center. We're up on the high, you know, it was, you know, first class or something. I'm not sure what it was. You know how the gen is. He always takes care of, you know, he has the finer things in life. And you know, and I went to this event. And usually, you know, I meet a lot of people, right? Yeah, I mean, especially when there was anything with Brian Cologne's events. I met a lot of people, but there were certain people that I met that kind of, you know, I stuck to and became friends with, right? And the day that I met you, I think you were with Gabe Trujillo too, and you guys were talking about your guys' car. I think he had his like Ferrari there or something, and you guys were talking, and then Mikey's like, "Hey, you got to meet the Jan. You got to meet the Jan." He's like, "You're gonna love him." And so he walked me over to you, and he introduced me to you, and then we just started talking. And the conversation that I had with you was the conversation that I have with family, with friends. Like, it was instant, right? It was a normal. I mean, here you are, millionaire, cars, all this, but it was like speaking to just a normal person, right? And, and then just like learning who you were and what you're about, and just seeing, like, you know, I've met some pretty rich, amazing, you know, successful people, and you know, it was just high and by, and you know, they never really gave me the time. You actually had a conversation with me, talked to me, and you know, kind of opened the door to like, hey, this is possible for you and you. You know, me and Nicole were kind of talking a little bit about how there's people that when they talk to you, they're looking for something and they want something from you, and you know, how can they use you to make themselves better? And there's also other people that will build you up, and that's what I got from meeting you. I mean, in Carson, seeing, you know, how you know, you were able to take someone that you didn't really know and help him out and teach him and mentor him and mentor like other people like Michael Garcia, and you know, he's in college now, right?
Gutierrez,
yeah. I mean, just watching you help these younger guys out, and then, you know, talking to you like you're just a normal Joe, like, you know,
like the success has never defined me. That's what people don't realize, right? I don't really care, and it's good. The reason I asked that question is because that's what you got. It's like Nikki, right? It doesn't matter what I've succeeded, but I'll talk to you. Just doesn't matter to me. Whatever you like. And that, what I guess what I saw in you, Andrew, what I really liked, and I told Carson what I saw in Carson, is that you guys wanted more. And you weren't like, can you give me a loan? Or can you touch me? Can you give me the, you weren't doing that. You were telling me, this is what I'm doing. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? This guy, if I put a little sauce in him, he can do this. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you have to make the effort. Like I used to always, my famous line is, I am not the business Jesus Christ. I cannot touch you, run a miracle, and all of a sudden you succeed. You got to put the work. I can advise you. I can give you a lot of things, what not to do. I can tell you what to do. But that's what I'm talking about. And I've always respected that effort. And this is something I learned new about you in the podcast, that Robin was kind of the one pushing you forward. And that's such an awesome story, because in today's society, relationships are not like really, they're kind of frowned upon, right? You got the Dan Bazilians of the world. You got Mr. Cool. You got all this shit. And it's not really like relationship sitting. Here you are succeeding. You're like, hey, the person I chose in my life, actually helped propel me. And I come from that world because my mom is the one who pushed my dad to succeed. She was the pusher. She's like, you're going to take 2 weeks off. You're going to rise in this job. We're going to go on vacation. And that's really awesome to see that. You know what I'm trying to say? Then that's you're right, because you choose the wrong person, they can sink you.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a scary part, right? In anything in life. Let me ask you this. What if you could go back to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself if there's any?
That's a tough question.
Stole my question, actually.
You know?
It's a good question.
It's hard, but just stay true to yourself. I mean, you have, I wish I would have stuck a little bit stronger on those principles that I learned from the Bible and God when I was younger. And I think that's the biggest advice I would give myself is be more obedient, because the best leaders are obedient and good followers, right?
And quiet.
They have to. Yeah, I mean, you get the verse in the Old Testament that talks about even a fool is wise in his silence, right? Even a fool looks wise when he's silent. I mean, just observe, be obedient, and cling on to those people that were uplifting and building. And for the longest time, because my mom and dad were divorced, and my stepdad was there, and for the longest time, I didn't necessarily cling on to him, right? He's a pastor, he's an attorney, he's a successful man, but the biggest thing about him is he puts God first in everything that he does. I mean, no matter what, that is his number one. I mean, he was involved in politics when he was younger. People were lining him up to become the next senator, right? He worked for Senator Domenici in Washington, D.C., and he was going to Georgetown Law School and in working under Domenici's office as the head correspondent. So everything that came in and out of that office went through my stepdad, right?
It was awesome too. In his story, was telling me he was working for one of the archbishops.
Yeah.
In that story, it's just great. He's a phenomenal man. He really impressed me. I don't get impressed easy, but Raphael, he really impressed me. And even like your dad's soul, your bio, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been to a lot of events with you guys, and it's just like you said, it's just a really cool. It's a very big family ship, and I think that's what's missing. And I think Raphael brings such a piece of community to people that don't literally have that much.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one thing I really respect about even what you do with the Bible study. I hear it's crazy. I get contacted from people, and they're like, you know what? You may not know who I am, but I'm there at Raphael's Bible study with Andrew, and he talked about it. And he showed the podcast, and that's pretty cool, Andrew. You know what I mean? That you're seeing that and you're helping the youth, because that's the only way we can prepare the future is by helping others, right? Denzel Washington has said it best. Raphael said that, your father. That's what's cool. I mean, Carson, what's one of the things in your mind that really stood out for you, like with Andrew when we brought him in the camp and you seen what was one, because you right away liked him. What was it for you?
I think Andrew, he basically had no ego or anything like that. He was just a genuine dude. Like when he talked to you, even when you first met him, you got who he was as a person, and you showed that really well through just our experience in meeting. And I think that's why I kind of grew to liking Andrew right away, is because he wasn't there to say, oh yeah, you can get a sense on people when they're just there for, like you were saying, an interest or anything. He was genuinely there, and he's one of those guys you could just tell instantly he'll take his shirt off his own back and give it to you. That's the sense I got from him right away. And just seeing how he is with his family and everything like that too was kind of something that I was like, me growing up, I really didn't have, I had my stepdad who did, come in there pretty early and bring me up. But from having an experience where you have, your biological father walk out on you and seeing someone like you, I'm like, wow, this guy's seeing it through, what I mean? So, and you could tell you're genuinely about your family and being there for them the way you had, your multiple father figures growing up too. That seems like to me had a massive impact on your life, because,
Absolutely.
you could have made a left turn to take you down a totally different road from where you would be at right now.
No, for sure. And in law enforcement, I deal with a lot of people, right? And I get to talk to a lot of people, and especially when they're in crisis in different situations, right? And that in itself is the biggest factor when you see successful people and you see people that are making bad choices, right? They didn't have no one to look up to. And, I could easily still have found those cracks because my dad was always working, right? My mom was always working. But, my older sister, Josie, she's pretty much the one that kind of raised us when we were really young,
Mhm.
because my parents were still trying to figure it out, right? They're in a divorce and this big old crisis happening and all this stuff happening. And, my mom's parents and her family, like literally for 10 years hated her. My grandpa would be coming to my house, breaking out windows and cussing at my mom.
Oh,
It
geez.
was insane, right? There was a
Mhm.
lot of stuff going on when we were younger. And so I can easily found those cracks, but when my sister filled in for like, that mom role, my older sister, Josie, and then like, my wife's uncle was my actually baseball coach, right? He filled in the shoes whenever I didn't have a ride to go to practice because my mom and dad were working.
Mhm.
He filled in and was that father figure. And then, when I was playing basketball, Rudy Gonzales was my basketball coach. Like all these different people that, were part of my life that really had a huge impact in my life, kind of like set me, in a path that I am today. And,
Mhm.
I say, like I have 3 dads, but I also had a community that was,
Yeah.
that I was open to pay attention to.
And that's the thing too, is that I'll highlight this, is you were open to all of that, because we'll see growing up in certain areas where, it's a little more harsh, a lot of people will kind of just have a wall on it, and they're like, you know what, no, I'm going to go by the streets, or whatever the case may be. What would you advise to kids in that realm right now, whether it's broken families or they're just completely on the wrong track? How would you advise them to kind of break out of that? What do you think did it for you? You know what I mean? For example.
Just honestly, you got to cling on to the people that are genuinely trying to help you, right? You got to cling on to those people, because if you let your pride stop you, at the end of the day, you fall.
Mhm.
And but when you humble yourself and you allow, these, you know, everyone has. It doesn't matter where they're at in their status of life. Everyone has something good to offer. Everyone does. And if you take that good, leave the bad, you can
Mhm.
grow from it. My grandpa was a really tough man, and my grandpa Sanchez was pretty tough, and he was a mean man. I mean, he was a tough. I mean, the stories I can talk about my grandpa were, they're insane. But even though he was a tough, mean guy, he had something good to offer.
Mhm.
He was an amazing carpenter, right? I'm able to build a house because of the skills that, when I was younger, him teaching me how to use the hammer right, or him, these little things, right?
Mhm.
Making me go and cut the weeds the way he did, and, different things of me growing up. I clinged on to the good in people, and anything that I got negative, I pushed away. I mean, I have some cousins that are amazing, big-hearted, amazing people. But if I would have followed them on the bad stuff they're doing because they had good hearts, I would have been in bad shape. I mean, I remember going out when I was probably around 15, 16 years old. My cousins were a little bit crazy, and I went out with them one night, and they're around 17, 18, they're a little older than me, and we went to like 3 or 4 parties. Every single party we went to, we got in a big old brawl with someone. They were taking their beers from, there was graduation weekend, so we're
Oh,
going to all
snap.
these graduation parties, right? They're all there stealing all the beer, going and making their own parties. And we were going to Central, and they were cruising, and someone looked at them funny, and they go and start busting out their
Yep.
windows. I mean, this happened in one
Crazy
night, right?
stuff. Yeah.
We're driving, and my cousin looks at someone, and they start arguing back and forth because he's drunk and he's driving, and this guy pulls out a gun on us, and now we're freaking running from him. I mean, this all happened in one day, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm not hanging out with him no more. I love my cousin, things are good. My sister and we're all together,
Yeah.
right? We're in her car, we're all, and we're party hopping, and really what we're doing is brawling because if I just stood around there, I'd be the one getting punched or beat up, because it's like that's how it was, right?
Yeah.
If you sat back or you're afraid, you're gonna get punked.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so we're over there all brawling, and even though I didn't agree with why they're fighting these guys, and they're stealing kegs, like get the keg, and they're running out of parties. This is the type of stuff.
It's ignorance, right?
Yeah.
And what's so sad, that ignorance, education really is not about, getting a college education, but a lot of it's just ignorance. And I think it's so sad that you're taught that, right? And this is why I think with today's world of social media, today's world of just the internet, you can just make yourself better if you're looking at the good shit.
Yeah.
People talk about looking at
Cling
the
on
bad
to the
stuff,
good.
right? But I look at the good stuff, and I see a lot of great quotes. I see a lot of Bible verses that I see, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense to me. I'm going to do this. I think that what we search, we're always going to find. And if we're searching for shit, we're going to find for shit. I think one thing, Andrew, I got to commend you on is, like, I think you're the poster child for being a police officer. I think you do a great job. Your demeanor, so people are telling me, cops are bad. I'm like, well, no, I know a lot of good cops, but you stand out in my mind because I see the way you conduct yourself as a person. I know that goes into your job and like the calmness and all that. Can you share a little bit about that, your approach, what you think you do different? Or
again, my spiritual background plays a big role. And when I was younger, you're taught a certain way how to be a police officer. You're taught a certain way how to, just like in anything, right? There's groups, right? There's the tough cops. There's the smart cops. There's that guy's going to be a chief one day. That's there's groups, right? It's just like high school. Well, when I was coming on as a rookie, I didn't know how to be a cop. I didn't know what I was doing, right? I'm 21 years old, thinking I'm know something. I didn't know nothing, but I'm taught, well, this is how you do things, and you don't take no disrespect, and all these different like things where I was kind of growing into. And then I would get like a veteran officer like, hey, bro, calm down. Or, hey, remember what you're doing this for. And, I'll never forget the story. And I talked about this in one of my Bible studies, but I took Robin on a ride along with me. I was a rookie. I didn't even have my own car yet, right? I was riding with someone, and that person actually was on vacation. So I borrowed his car. And so I was like, oh, my first time out with myself, I'm going to go on a ride along, right? I'm going to take my girlfriend on the ride along. I'm going to show her what I do, try to show off. And that particular month that we had dealt with this female several times, and she was getting beat up by her boyfriend several times. And every time we'd go there, she would always say the same stuff. I don't know who it is. And, like she would kind of play the, she didn't want to rat him out. And this particular time we got the call. It was at the Motel 6 on Central, and I live. And we show up to the call, and I'm Mr. Tucker. Oh man, this call again, and not really having compassion for the victim. I'm just thinking, it's a burden on me. It's a burden on me, right? Yeah. So I'm coming over here, this police officer with all this authority, and I'm walking into the situation. I'm going to show my girlfriend how I take control, right? And so we walk into the hotel room. I'm like, get your stuff and get out. I'm tired of you, calling us. If you don't want our help, then don't call us. And you're not going to tell us who your boyfriend is. So what the heck? And and this time he whooped her pretty good, right? She was bleeding pretty bad, and there was some blood all over the walls, and it was a bad situation, and I didn't see that, right? I just saw my pride, and I was trying to show off, right?
Yeah.
And what a way to get humbled, right? Because maybe if she told us to another officer, it might not hit her as much, but for me, it hit me hard because of my spiritual background, right? So she looks at me and she says, "You know what? I want to tell you something." She's like, "I'm your sister in Christ." She told me. She's like, "You might look at me as dirt, but I'm your sister in Christ." And talk about like it felt like a 100-pound bag of concrete just nailed me in my chest at one time, right? It just knocked me. I teared up, man, and I said, "You're absolutely right." And I looked at my girlfriend, my wife now, but I looked at my girlfriend, and I was just in total. I felt shame, right? I was like, what kind of man does she think that I am? That I would walk in a situation, I have no compassion for this person. Though she's going, you think that she wants to be in that situation? No one wants to. They want to see the good in people, just like we all do. Yeah. And she's trying to see the good in this individual, and it just doesn't work out for her. And here I am making it even worse. Going in there with an attitude, and that moment was the moment that I decided, I can't act this way. I can't be this way. I got to be a spiritual person first, and then whether I fit in, I don't fit, it doesn't matter. I got to be a spiritual person first, and then let everything else fall in place. And after that, I treated everyone as the way she said it. I always remembered after that she is my sister in Christ. So every call that I went to, including the people that were, we had a guy throw, feces at us. He didn't throw it on us, but he threw it at us, just 2 days ago, but I'm still thinking and telling them and reminding myself more than anything that that's still my brother in Christ, or that's my sister in Christ. If with that mentality, it makes me do this job the way that I should do it. Right. Service, and not about me, it's about them. And that's like the biggest thing that really stood with me. And every single call, I always remember that I'm never going to treat someone that way again. I'm not going to push them to be, to make them feel like they're lower than, right. They're still my brother. God sees us all the same way. That's how I ought to see him. And that was like the big turning point for me in how I choose to do this job.
That's freaking awesome, man. That's a freaking awesome story. That just blows me away. Andrew, do you think now, as you've gotten older, what's the stuff that really matters to you now? Like I know we all want the good shit in life, but what has changed? Is there anything, or has it changed, or is it the same thing? What has kept you? What keeps that fire going for you?
Honestly, I truly live my life with what is in front of me. You know, uh, my stepdad has this saying. You know, the most important person to me is the person that's in front of me. And you know, I try to live my life that way. Whereas, you know, I don't really focus on what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't focus what happened to me in my past. I focus on what I can control, which is right now. And so, you know, whether it be like right now, building a house. Well, that's my focus, right? It's time to build a house. I said, me and my wife, you know, it was 10 years ago. We looked at this house, and we always loved this house. And when we were looking at this house, we manifested. We said we're going to live in this house one day. We're gonna buy this property one day and rebuild this house. And you know, it took 9 years before we actually bought it. But you know, I never thought about it again. We manifested it. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I don't know when it was going to happen. But when it was the right time when it happened. And that's kind of the way I live my life. You know, I let it happen for me. I just, you know, I focus on what's in front of me. If someone calls me, I answer my phone all the time, because when they're calling me, it's an opportunity.
Yep.
You know, whether I'm at work and someone's in front of me, or, you know, someone works for me, wants work for me, or there's, you know, a citizen I come across, that's what I focus on. Because if I focus on what's ahead of me only, I get caught up, and I kind of let my wife kind of do the future thinking, when it comes to certain things. But for the most part, I focus on what's in front of me, and I know where I'm going. I know that I'm going to go to law school, right? That's the next thing. Once I'm finished with this house, the next step is, when it's time to start focusing on it, I'm going to focus full force, just like I did with this house, or just like I did with my career with law enforcement. I'm going to put full focus on getting to law school. It's going to happen. I'm going to make sure it happens. I don't know how or when, but it's going to happen.
You live in the principle that I live by, and it's called living in the present, living in the moment. Like the Buddhist monks have always talked about. If you maximize your present moment, then your future is going to look good, and so is your past. And it's so awesome to hear from your perspective that we walk the same paths. The same things that got me to my level of success. It's like literally talking to a mirror. You're literally reiterating in different words what I tell people. How I got to where I'm at is focusing in the moment. I'm never dreaming about what the next guy has. I don't really give a crap. I'm maximizing the moment. When I get an opportunity, I go 110%. That's all I know how to do is 110%. And if I'm not doing 110%, then I'm cheating myself out. Because you never know you're going to ever get that moment again. That's the scary part, right? Is you think I got this moment, but you never will get that moment again. You know, that's the brutal piece.
And that's Andrew living the true, and this is what we're here to do, right? And we're showing your story because you are living the true young millionaire culture and mindset. Because the hardest thing and the biggest thing I believe in what you just said too is if you don't believe in yourself or believe that you can achieve something or can get one of your goals accomplished, you're not going to do it. So I could full force sit here and I'll put all my money that you're going to do exactly what you're saying, because we can feel the belief level in it. And that's exactly what, the hardest level to achieve any massive goal that you're trying to get to, that'll do it. So you're already half the battle, but you live exactly by all of our values and saying your constant willingness, your diligence, picking up the phone, you know what I mean? You're always on the ball, and you're basically not going to accept any other option than what your goal is.
No, for sure.
And this is we circle back, and we talked about this, Carson. We're going to, in our next, not this next episode, but the following one, is we're going to talk about what the young millionaire culture is about. And it's not about making $1 million, not being a multi-millionaire, it's not even all that crap. And when I formed Young Millionaires years ago, it was about the mindset. That's exactly what Young Millionaires is about. I get people see the flashy stuff, and I say the young millionaires. And we were there. I remember in California, the guy's like, "Well, I'm old. I'm not a millionaire."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what? I said,
we still get that a lot from
people.
We
do, but I'm telling him, I said, you lost right here. You're not a millionaire up here. It's not about the quantifiable object. It's not about the quantifiable monetary gain. It's about where's your mindset. So of course you're never going to be a millionaire. You're not even going to be a thousandaire, because your mindset's, you're broken in your head.
Yeah.
You're broken in your soul, and that's where it starts. And that's what I truly, my dad was telling me a story. And he says, when you were a little boy, you knew exactly what you were going to do. He used to tell me all the time. And I don't even remember these stories, but at the end of the day, it's conviction, right? And I love that. And just, so I'm going to circle up. And did you get a chance to look at the top 10, my success?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Out of one of those ones, which is the one that really stands out to you, that touches you?
You know, the number 8 is like the biggest one for me, to be clear and honest with people, right? Because, you know, at the end of the day, you got to be a man of your word, right? You gotta, you know, that's all you can control in life, right? You know, wealth can come and go, you know, situations can come up and, you know, take away certain things in your life, but no one can take away your honesty. No one can take away your integrity. And, be clear and honest with people, you know, being upfront with them and telling them, you know, your yes be yes, your no be no, like, you know, kind of like my teacher told me, right? You know, let your don't walk the walk, talk the talk, right? I mean, don't talk the
Exactly.
talk, walk the walk. Sorry,
Yeah.
but you know, those type of you know, things that we stand on, you know, like these principles that we stand on, that we choose, that this is who I am and this is what I'm going to be about. And you know, if you take away number 8, a lot of these fail, right? If
Yep.
you're not honest, you're not clear and honest, you can't, you know, keep your record clean. You can't, you know, people's opinions, you know, all these other things kind of.
It's like the building
Yeah.
block, right? But read that second part of that.
It says, trust me, we all will choose our self-interest over anyone else's, to be clear.
And so
be
when
clear.
when I touch about that, like, I love what you come, Andrew. You always come from that positive view. And when I put that spin on that, it's because people are always going to do what they want ultimately, and what they want. So when you be clear, you be clear on what parts you're going to do, and then you're very saying, this is what I want out of it. And then, so that's kind of that piece. But I love what you put. Wrapping up, guys, what the thing that I want to tell you guys about in closing is that here is a true success story. What a success story in your community. Right here, you can identify what he's done. He's been successful in his life, successful in his dreams, successful in his marriage, 2 amazing kids, amazing wife, and that's a true success story. So ultimately, when you're looking at people, that's a success for you. You look at it, that's why we brought Brian early on in the game and showing what he's done. He's told you his story, and this is what the Truth Podcast is about, because there is no get rich quick schemes out there. I promise you, it's all bullshit. Take it from someone who's built one block at a time. Thank you guys for joining us on the Truth Podcast, and thank you, Andrew, for joining us here. We
Thanks for the
appreciate
invite.
it. And so we're out.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, man.